welcome to this evening session of the Raleigh City Council July 7th meeting, virtual meeting. We are going to start with public comment. We have 12 people who have registered to speak this evening. I just want to remind people on the rules. You will have 3 minutes. Speakers shall be civil and courteous in their language and presentation. Insults, profanity, use of vulgar language, or gestures or other inappropriate behavior are not allowed. Speakers shall refrain from personal attacks and threats directed towards city staff or members of the public. And all we ask really is that you be kind. And I'm going to start by calling up the first speaker, and that is Wanda Gilbert Khoka.
Hello?
Hello.
Yes.
Wanda, you see the timer? You should be able to see the timer. Let's see at the virtual podium.
No, I do not see it, but y'all can just let me know. I'm reading my speech.
Here you go now. It's up there.
Okay.
Okay.
My name is Wanda Gilbert Khoka, and I am a member of the Wake County Housing Justice Coalition. I live in Southeast Raleigh, where the lack of low-income housing directly impacts my community. Tonight, I stand in opposition to the proposed 2020 housing bond because it does not affirmatively further fair housing. Fair housing should be a meaningful priority in shaping the intended results of the bond. This means the city should address the specific and identified needs of its residents and take a balanced approach to growth by ensuring that affordable housing is located downtown and other areas of the city. In areas impacted by gentrification, deconcentrating poverty could create a disparity in who has the opportunity to live in a newly created area of opportunity. Replacing segregated living patterns and transforming racially and ethnically concentrated areas of poverty into areas of opportunity does not mean mass displacement of the poor in order to accomplish this task. Low-income and long-term residents should benefit from the revitalization occurring in these communities. A hands-off approach to the affirmatively furthering fair housing obligation by saying the developers are displacing people is a failure by Larry Jarvis's Housing and Neighborhoods Department to meet its fair housing obligations. In the city's 2016-2020 consolidated plan, the city was required to seek citizen participation in creation of the plan. The city received numerous public comments and the plan states rising costs have continued to encourage modest apartment communities with housing stock that's past its prime but affordable to households with modest incomes to sell to developers who clear the sites to create denser upscale luxury apartments as they are advertised. This has reduced the number of affordable units and put an upward pressure on existing rents. These trends have also prompted some members of minority communities to raise the alarm about gentrification and displacement. Nonprofits through service programs only maintain the status quo and don't result in economic opportunity, which leads to economic mobility. Again, the city must take a systemic approach to solving gentrification because services only help individual people. A systemic problem requires a systemic solution. The purpose of the 1968 Civil Rights Act, known as the Fair Housing Act, was to provide opportunity to those trapped in impoverished living, moving a concentrated area of poverty to another area.
Wanda, your time is up, please. Thank you.
Okay.
You've exceeded the 3 minutes. Thank you. Next up is Lakeya Shupek.
Not have Lakeya on the call.
You don't. Beth?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Julie Savage.
Given to me from a friend who's under police protection because her husband was domestically violent, and this is on behalf of actually her child. This is a letter from an abused child titled, "Will you meet with me?" I am lying in bed. I hear the footsteps of my father climbing the stairs. I'm shivering because I don't want to be spit on again. I don't want to be hit again. Are you familiar with the police department utilizing family services? I am willing to tell you they saved my family. Will you meet with me? I am so willing to meet with you that I will clean the broken glass left by the rioting packs. I'm willing to clean the ashes from the burning of the American flag from the rioting packs. I would never throw firecrackers into the courthouse. Is that good enough for you to meet with me? The goal of these rioting packs is not to defund the police. The goal of the rioting packs is to defund the police to change our city from a republic into a socialist communist regime. Stalin is their hero, not mine. Do you know who my hero is? It is the Raleigh City Police Department. Am I good enough to meet with you? And I just want you guys to know, Raleigh City Council, I am standing on Blount Street right now in front of the governor's mansion, and Occupy Raleigh is gone, and Americans have taken over this road, and we are tired of you guys allowing Occupy Raleigh to take over our streets and to stay here and to whine about a bill that, that's not the way to handle things. And they stayed here, and it took police protection that they're so against to babysit them while they were sleeping on the road in their sleeping bags. And, when they were scared, they went to the police. They didn't like motorcyclists. And so they went to the police and asked for help. And, motorcycles scare them. So anyway, Raleigh City Council, I don't know why you are taking so much of your orders from these people, these terrorists that rioted and trashed our downtown. Why aren't you listening to the American people that pay your taxes? I don't even think that those people, even half of them, live in North Carolina, and you're taking orders from them. And, we're Americans. We work together. We support our police. We support our military. We support each other. We share Jesus with them. And we love each other. And that's how we're supposed to handle things, not by occupying Raleigh until we get our way and wasting taxpayer dollars to be able to have police protection, that they are anti-police, and having them destroy our downtown. And, so it's just sad. You guys are bringing on a communist country, and we don't want that. It's not American, and we need to look at
Julie, your 3 minutes are up. Thank you. Next, we have Chelsea Le Chatellier.
That's Le Chatellier, actually. Hi, Mayor Baldwin and the rest of the Raleigh City Council. If you hear a lot of noise in the background, that's because I am standing on the sidewalk in front of the governor's mansion, because my friends who live here in Wake County, who have accomplished something that you all cannot seem to do, which is kick the protesters off the sidewalk. We live here. This is our home. We love our city. We love our Raleigh Police Department. We love the State Capitol Police. We know everyone. We are down here all the time, and this is our city. We will not stand by and let them get kicked off. And we do not understand why you let them stay here for a week without taking action. We were down here for months trying to reopen our city, and not once did we get an audience with you all, but they get to call the shots. They get to go around not getting a permit to block off streets and to surround cars from good Wake County citizens who are simply trying to get home from the grocery store. It is unacceptable. You need to get it together. Let the Raleigh Police Department and the State Capitol Police do their job. We pay taxes just like them. I don't even know if they live here. I don't think they do. They are very upset with us because we've kicked them off their sidewalk, but yet they're still inhabiting a parking lot, which they're not supposed to do. And they have Capitol Police assistance because somebody has to keep an eye on them. We just ask that you do what you were elected to do, which is to protect the city, allow the police department to do their job. They're actually very good at it. They are extremely capable. I yield my time.
Thank you, Chelsea. Next, we have Jordy Bande.
Hey, how are you doing? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Jordy.
Okay. So I'm actually coming in from a completely different angle. I would like to ask if we could implement some type of a voting manual. I'm aware that we have a bunch of resources on the NC State Board website that give you the candidates that are running and the positions they're running for. But what I would like you guys to implement is a little manual that would have whatever elections are going on, the candidates and their platforms, so that first time voters and people that do not generally know how to vote because they're, maybe voting by party or whatever they're hearing, can actually go and vote for people they align with. I truly, truly believe that designing something that would work that way would increase voting turnout, because I know that a lot of people that I know would vote, but they just don't. They feel like their choices are limited and they don't necessarily see how they align with whatever candidates they're voting for. I also believe that it would lower feelings of discontent towards officials because they would directly be in charge of the voting and feel as though their contribution for whoever they're choosing is actually going for, whatever their platform is. And I also think that it would really help with any voting suppression tactics that might be in place, because I think that it would give everybody an opportunity to derail those, and I think that would be an appropriate step. And that's really all I have to say, so I yield my time.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Jennifer Castro.
Hi, I am speaking on behalf of the idea of defunding the police department. Just some of the programs that are included are the legal aid, the victim witness services, canine units, the gang suppression unit, a family violence intervention unit, youth service unit, which is responsible for conducting school pedestrian safety programs. And as a parent of a young child, I have had friends that have been victims of domestic violence that if it wasn't for the police, that they might not still be around. Their kids might not still be around. So I think it's really a bad idea to get rid of the police department or to defund them to the point where we can't have very many of them. I also feel like it will bring on vigilante justice instead, where gun owners are going to come out ablazing, maybe, if there is no intervention as far as a person in control, like the police department. So I don't want to see our state turn into Seattle, where the CHOP took over most of the state or most of the city, and it was just really, really bad. And I would hate for this state to turn out the same way just because of the police. I mean, I just think it's a poor idea. Maybe some more education or some different programming would be good, but I think getting rid of them completely or defunding them to that degree would be very detrimental for everybody in the state. And I guess that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Next, we have Tim Niles.
Hi, this is Tim Niles, 11509 Midlothian Drive in Raleigh. When I challenged Councillor Melton on his flip-flop regarding CACs from his campaign promise to improve them to his ultimate vote to abolish them, he told me that he sincerely wanted to improve them, but after being elected was informed that CACs had refused to change for years. Of course, this isn't true. CACs were changing. They standardized their charters across the system. They were live streaming their meetings for those who couldn't attend in person. We're recording and posting them on social media to be viewed later. At least one provided Spanish translations of their agendas and minutes. The one recommendation CACs refused to adopt was to change their structure from an independent, grassroots, citizen-led organization into a top-down bureaucracy appointed by and beholden to City Council. CACs tried to increase citizen awareness, asking the city to include information about them in utility bills, but they were refused. They asked for more help with technology. They were refused. They asked for help reaching out to residents and apartments. They were refused. It's not hard to understand how Councilor Melton was led astray. Mary Ann Baldwin has spent her entire political career in Raleigh, both behind the scenes and from the council table, working to diminish the role and influence of CACs. She tried but failed to ban councilors from attending CAC meetings, but was successful banning councilors from attending task force and commission meetings or even speaking publicly about any topic before them. The irony is that she violated that rule within 10 days of its implementation by being quoted in the News and Observer with her opinion of what the short-term rental task force should recommend. Let's be very clear. There was only one reason council abolished CACs: to eliminate the independent voices of citizens involved in rezoning cases, and they did it as payback to the developers who bought their campaigns. They've replaced those independent voices with a meeting labeled neighborhood, but which is under the complete control of the developers, and they have no intention of ever allowing those independent voices to return. Finally, Mr. Melton, will you return the $8,000 in campaign contributions you received from the owners of Brewery Bavana in Betamanda after the recent revelations of sexual predation? Thank you for your time.
Next, we have Andrew McDonald.
Hi, thank you, esteemed council members. I hope you're all smiling because if you've read my proposal, I think we may share the same heart for the constituents of your city. I have a background of a 20-year trial attorney, but at the end of that, I was as broken as shattered glass. My faith journey started about 5 years ago down in Southeast Texas, and I was led to the Dream Center of Southeast Texas, where I helped start a ministry that took over a failed prison. And at the end of 2.5 years, 3 years, we were serving 900 families with food, clothing, and hygiene. We were holding after-school programs for children with the gymnasium, and we had an in-house rehabilitation substance abuse facility for men where we fed, clothed them, and got their GEDs through addiction and back into society as changed men. No matter what trial or verdict was ever rendered in my life, nothing fulfills my calling or purpose like ministry does. I'm here to be the hands and feet on the ground in your community, just to serve. And in that capacity, I'm coming. The proposal is to not only give credence to the words I say, but it's to help identify maybe an underutilized property in or around Moore Square or in the hard-hit areas where we can be most effective. Having men that are transforming in their lives and becoming productive again, alive again, to have them serve the community at the same time has a transformation that is multiplied to an effect that it is hard to hold back tears when you witness. I would love to speak to you further. I have been in contact with Jeremy Porras, who has the Raleigh Dream Center and is currently doing a lot of work with regards to outreach. And we may collaborate with regards to the substance abuse facility, but having walked that walk, I feel that's where my God-given talents are best utilized, is really sitting with the guy that is contemplating suicide or thinks life is over and taking his hand him that there is a way. Gotta forgive me because I get choked up. But I really appreciate your time. I will be with Jeremy on Thursday. I welcome the opportunity to meet with you. I've had the opportunity to work with organizations that change this nation on a daily basis, which is 8 Days of Hope and Mercy Chefs with Any Given Disaster. And people like myself and yourself, servant leaders, we thrive in chaos. And I think at this point in time, with regards to what's going on in our communities, on our streets, in our societies, it's people that with a servant heart that will show people that this is a great nation, it's a great community, and we are loving at our core.
Andrew, thank you so much for your comments. Your time is up. but deeply appreciate your sentiments. Thank you. Councilor Cox.
Yeah, I was wondering if staff could work with this gentleman. He sounds very passionate, and maybe work with him to find a way that he can become involved. Is it something you could do, Rafa?
Certainly, we can investigate the questions he's asking. I'm not immediately familiar with some of the things, so why don't we have staff follow up with him, and then we'll provide you a kind of a follow-up report of what we learned.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Next, we have Donna Bailey.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes,
can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I want to talk today about the hypocrisy of Mayor Baldwin. In a recent meeting with Raleigh Demands Justice, Baldwin said there was a public process for deciding that another police substation would be located in southeast Raleigh. It turns out that public process was with the CACs. Imagine that. How convenient to use the CACs when it serves your purpose. By the way, you said CACs were now defunct. That is not true at all. The CACs are moving forward with their mission of educating the residents of Raleigh and providing them with much needed information on a variety of issues, just without the support of the city. The RCAC is meeting monthly, and many CACs are meeting virtually. Baldwin has never supported the citizen voice on council. During her previous 10 years on council, Baldwin often gave lip service to citizens, but always voted to support the developers. So it was no surprise when she supported the total and immediate elimination of CACs. To do that with nothing else in place truly shows who the mayor represents. Baldwin was very quick to show her election sponsors who she works for. Of the $320,000 that she raised directly for her campaign, over $176,000 came from developers. That is 61%. 61%. On top of that, Baldwin secured a nice cushy job with Barnhill, one of the largest construction firms in North Carolina, after the election. Get this, her job is to bring in new business for Barnhill. In other words, she's a lobbyist. It's not too difficult to follow the money. In addition to the overwhelming support from developers, she now has a very well-paid job with Barnhill to bring in more business. How will Raleigh residents know who you are really representing? Is there a development that you won't vote for? Since we now have only 3 new councilors who don't really understand the rezoning process, how will you be influencing them to vote your way? We've already seen how they don't speak up to represent their constituents. How can anyone, resident or other council member, know who you are representing? How do we know when you meet with anyone from the development industry that Barnhill won't be the recipient of some of the business that you will be generating with your approval of any rezoning case? How is this not a huge conflict of interest with your current position? Since you are now a lobbyist for Barnhill, I do not see how you can keep your position as mayor. One of those has to change. I don't think that even the measly 8% of registered voters who supported you in the last election wanted to elect a lobbyist for the construction industry. In conclusion, as mayor, you have an enormous conflict of interest with every construction contract that is approved by the city. There is no trust that you will do the right thing.
Ms. Bailey, your time is up. Thank you. Next, we have Monica Ussery.
Hi, so it's Ussery, but I would first like to start off by introducing myself. I am the first protester that was arrested for protesting on April 14th of this year, and I was arrested, according to the police department, for merely standing in a public parking lot, which did, of course, sorry, we've actually commandeered the sidewalk back again outside of the governor's mansion here, and we're receiving some good old-fashioned American support here. Sorry for the interruption, but back to my point. I'd really like to know why my charges haven't been dropped. That's number one, because as we know, the left-leaning leadership in this Raleigh area were more than gracious when it came to the protests that came later. And I don't understand why my Constitution doesn't cover me as well as the Constitution covers other people in this city. Moving on, I would like to say that I love Raleigh. We've worked really, really hard to help the businesses, and we've worked really hard to pull together to fight against domestic violence. I'm a volunteer for the women's shelter. Let me know when I'm okay. You're good. And I work with a group of really wonderful volunteers who are helping the community get back on their feet. We are not going to allow ourselves to get depressed. We are going to stay positive. But I really feel like that it would be easier to stay positive if we felt like we had a voice that was being listened to, and we felt like real situations were actually being addressed on both sides of the aisle. Bipartisanship. Americans. We're all Americans. We're all bipartisan. We all love Raleigh, and we just really would like to see Raleigh thrive. If we don't want to see Raleigh thrive, then we shouldn't have a voice. All of us that want to see Raleigh thrive should have a voice. And I'd like to yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Jane Coons.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Jane.
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to remind some people who spoke before me today here that Black Americans are Americans and the protesters are Americans, and protesting is our right. Shame on anyone who spreads the propaganda that these grassroots protesters don't live in Raleigh. You're disgusting and you should be ashamed of yourself. In light of RPD's long history of violent, racist policing and their particularly brutal and frankly embarrassing behavior in the past 2 months, I'm here to reiterate and amplify the demands of Raleigh Pact and the Raleigh Demands Justice Coalition. I'll highlight a few of these demands now. I demand that no new police stations be built in primarily Black neighborhoods to reduce the gross over-policing of Black communities. I demand a policy requiring officers to intervene when a cop abuses a member of our community. It is not enough to just say that this is expected. It must be codified in law. I demand investment in community-led health and safety strategies instead of further investing in police. I demand subpoena power for the newly formed Oversight Board to strengthen their ability to effectively review and investigate grievances. Thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you. Next, we have Brian Crisp.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening, Brian. We can hear you.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for letting me speak. At the June 16th council meeting, Mayor Baldwin expressed her concerns for people experiencing homelessness in our city. These concerns were again expressed during a virtual meeting on Saturday, June 27th with Raleigh Demands Justice. The mayor commented that she was working with Chief Cassandra Deck Brown to explore ways to train police officers to work with people experiencing homelessness. She also commented that Raleigh is investigating ways to fund a mental health and homeless unit that would be part of the Raleigh Police Department. My work for many years has been as a minister who works with people experiencing homelessness. I also convene the Interfaith Homelessness Education Action and Response Network. I support any effort that will ensure anyone is further educated about people experiencing homelessness. However, I am opposed to policies which appear to criminalize homelessness and which appear to attend leverage policing as a viable solution to a city's approach addressing homelessness, rather than developing policies that would address the root causes which contribute to a systemic issue that continually leaves citizens hungry and homeless. People experiencing homelessness are disproportionately Black, Brown, Indigenous people of color. Raleigh is no exception as her wealth disparity continues to grow. Instead of leaving these citizens out, Raleigh should commit to the basic human rights of housing, food, transportation, mental and physical health services. And although Wake County has made tremendous strides with its creation of a Department of Housing Affordability, Raleigh has lagged in her efforts. So I encourage this council to boldly address these systemic issues by doing the following. Create and fund a mental health and homelessness care team that performs crisis intervention by staffing and utilizing mental health specialists and social workers not part of the Raleigh Police Department. Move forward with an affordable housing bond that targets our neighbors living well below 30% of AMI. Ensure that those same citizens can access and utilize Go Raleigh Transit at no cost. And along with your racial training, commit to a race audit, an evaluative measure designed to identify the sources of persistent racial inequality implicit in current practices. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you very much.
Mayor, we do now have Lakeya Shupak on.
Okay, great. Thank you. Lakeya?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
My name is Lakeya Shupak. I live at 408 East Target Street. And clearly the public comments today show that City Council has a real choice and that we're at a turning point. Calling people who object to police violence terrorists, Stalinists, not real Americans, outside agitators, and a number of other things is meant to delegitimize and dehumanize us and excuse any violence that is committed against us. And it is not the side you want to be on. I am a North Carolinian and a Raleigh resident, and I stand in solidarity with Raleigh Pact and Raleigh Demands Justice in demanding that we defund a police force that commits violence against Black and brown people in our city with impunity. I believe in funding health and social programs that help people in our community rather than police who are not equipped to handle most of the tasks that they are deployed for and reach for violence when they inevitably come up short. Police also are a big part of the domestic violence problem. They are 2 to 4 times more likely to commit domestic violence than the general public, and that's only when social is officially reported. City Council needs to move to implement the Raleigh Demands Justice reforms, defunding police, and investing in our communities. Mayor Baldwin also needs to resign from her position at Barnhill Construction, which is a clear conflict of interest. And City Council needs to implement democracy reforms that prevent city officials from taking these kinds of positions and that allow working people to hold office. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you very much. Okay, that's the completion of public comment. We will now go on to matters scheduled for public hearing. That first item is the November 2020 Affordable Housing Bond Referendum. I believe we have Larry Jarvis here to kick things off.
Good evening, Mayor Baldwin, members of the council. We do have a brief PowerPoint presentation to just kind of provide a recap of how we got here this evening. And again, we did have a bond advisory committee who made their report to you on May 19th. Just for information, that was 24 members, very diverse representation on that committee. Had 14 meetings, did a survey with very good response. The committee recommended these bond package elements at that meeting in May. And again, there are 5 bond elements or buckets as we refer to them. Some of the specific bond package considerations they shared with you was that the committee supported a higher percentage of units affordable at 30% AMI than produced over the past 5 years. And the committee recognized that additional city subsidy is required to accomplish that. Then at the June 16th City Council meeting, staff presented some policy options. We looked at some assumptions about income targeting for each of the buckets, options for increasing the number of 30% AMI units in tax credit projects, and there was consideration of a major permanent supportive housing project for the chronically homeless. So next steps is for staff to develop a proposed combined funding matrix that includes the bond elements, federal resources, and local funds over a 5-year period. We're working on that. We were asked to prepare a report on existing income targeting by program, including the Raleigh Housing Authority, and staff is to develop and present specific policy options for achieving greater 30% AMI income targeting. So I'll be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Does anybody have any questions for Larry? No, okay. Well, I'm going to open the public hearing. We have 5 people who have asked to speak who are opposed to the bond, and 5 who have asked to speak in support. You have a conflict on number here. Hold on one second. I have 6 who are asked to speak against it. So I'm going to ask those folks to come. I will call you by name, and you will each have 2 minutes, which is posted up on the podium. The first is Hua Huang.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Hua Huang, 7401 Ebenezer Church Road, Raleigh. Tonight I speak as a member of the Wake County Housing Justice Coalition, and I fully support the statement and the letter by Yolanda Taylor sent June 1st on behalf of the coalition. The city should provide more details regarding how the money in each bucket be spent by taking a page from the City of Durham's Affordable Housing Bond Playbook. Durham engaged meaningfully and directly with residents and was very transparent in what the bond would do, who it would help, and what it would cost taxpayers. Some highlights of Durham's bond included recommendations that this coalition would like to see in Raleigh's affordable housing bond. These include the following. 1. Create affordable home ownership opportunity with long-term income restrictions, downtown affordable housing of all types for seniors, for family, etc., and smaller scale affordable rental options. 2. Support existing low-income homeowners through rehab and repair funds and expand use of existing state and county property tax relief programs. 3. Strengthen the homeless housing system. 4. Produce green affordable rental housing and preserve existing rental housing for households at less than 50% AMI. 5. Commit to creating very low AMI housing, such as under 30% AMI, and create opportunity for 30% minority contracting for all public and private expenditures. 6. Especially due to COVID-19, support an eviction diversion program with legal aid and add housing assistance related to evictions, utilities, and mortgage foreclosure. 7. Establish an overall commitment to permanent affordability versus just time-limited affordability. The Housing Justice Coalition recommends the bond process should be slowed down to increase opportunity for residents, education, and input, and address more intentionally the needs of affordable housing with low-wage workers, especially with current health crisis, placing them at even greater need of housing below 30% AMI. At this time, the housing bond leaves much to be desired in order to be a bond that can truly serve those in need. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Yolanda Taylor.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, can.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Yolanda Taylor. Okay. Hi, Mayor Baldwin and esteemed council members. My name is Yolanda Taylor. I reside in Wake Forest, North Carolina. I'm a fair housing and community economic development attorney. I authored the proposed affordable housing bond on behalf of the Wake County Housing Justice Coalition. The cry in the street for racial justice is not just a cry against police killings. It's a cry against systemic racism in all systems. Some of us are literally sacrificing our bodies along with our allies to the pandemic of COVID and the pandemic of racism in our quest for racial justice. Nancy Pelosi was recently quoted as saying that one knee to the neck open a tinderbox of inequities to address, one being housing. Housing sits at the heart of a center of multi-institutions that reproduce inequity. After fighting for voting rights, Martin Luther King realized that fair housing was the essential need in order to create a truly integrated pattern of living for those who were left trapped in impoverished communities. For King and others who fought for fair housing gave us the tools to address the systemic issues of racially segregated neighborhoods, which also made them vulnerable to gentrification. We know that this pandemic of COVID-19 only unearthed the inequities in housing and neighborhoods. It's no coincidence that one of the hottest spots for COVID is in Southeast Raleigh. It's not Black behavior that makes us more susceptible to COVID. It's the historic conditions of our neighborhoods and where we live that's quite frankly making us sick. Most of these neighborhoods laid underinvested and vulnerable to the prey of serial developers because they were ignored for years and underinvested. These led to the social determinants of health. If Raleigh wishes to address the cries against structural racism and historical inequities, it must address housing and the mass displacement caused by unequitable planning and development. We must address the root causes of poverty and economic disparities.
Thank you. You've exceeded your time. Thank you. Next, we have Wanda Gilbert Khoka.
Hi, this is Wanda Gilbert Khoka again, and I am a member of the Wake County Housing Justice Coalition. And as I said before, I live in Southeast Raleigh, where the lack of low-income housing directly impacts my community. Tonight, again, I will say I stand in opposition to the proposed 2020 housing bond because it does not affirmatively further fair housing. A systemic problem requires systemic solution. The purpose of the 1968 Civil Rights Act, known as the Federal Fair Housing Act, was to provide opportunity to those trapped in impoverished living. Moving a concentrated area of poverty to another area of the city is not providing the people who live there with access to opportunity. If a concentrated area of poverty is just going to be moved somewhere else. Therefore, it is important that the proposed affordable housing bond provides some affordable housing to those who are at risk of being displaced in downtown Raleigh and southeast Raleigh due to gentrification. The city must be intentional in its land use and zoning strategy, public-private partnerships, and in its incentives to developers to make affordable housing a priority. After all, gentrification was caused by the city's failure to equitable development. In the city's 2016-2020 consolidated plan, the city admitted to that its focus on creating innovative downtown districts caused gentrification and displacement. The plan states the following: the primary housing challenge for Raleigh's low and moderate income residents is housing costs. Raleigh's continued rapid growth and focus on creating an innovation district downtown has resulted in increased land prices, especially near downtown and southeast Raleigh.
Wanda, you have gone beyond your 2 minutes. Thank you. Next, we have Bob Geary.
Hi, you can hear me, I hope?
We sure can. Thank you.
Okay, Bob Geary, 202 East Park Drive. I, too, am a member of the Wake Housing Justice Coalition. I fully support the statement made by Yolanda Taylor and the letter she sent on June 1st on behalf of the coalition, and I hope that you've read it. Our letter spells out why we oppose this bond issue as it stands. We hope that you will fix the bond issue, but you have not as yet, and time is clearly very short. The kinds of options Larry Jarvis just outlined needed to be addressed before we reached this step, but of course, they have not been. The Housing Justice Coalition has made more than a dozen recommendations to you. I think they can be summarized under 3 headings. First, we want a commitment that the bond issue will be used primarily to assist low and very low income people, those at 30% of annual median income and below. Second, we want a commitment that the money will not be used to further the gentrification of historically African American communities. In fact, we want a commitment that it will be used to preserve the naturally occurring affordable housing in these neighborhoods and build on it. Third, we want a commitment that oversight of the spending will be public, transparent, and carried out by a group named by City Council that includes substantial representation from the impacted communities, including the African American neighborhoods of Southeast and Southwest Raleigh. I want to underscore one point in our June 1st letter. The city must do more than make symbolic gestures towards equity and diversity. We must work on becoming an inclusive city for all. We need deep community participation to establish valid, affordable housing plans, and with this bond issue, we certainly have not had that. And affordable housing must be a citywide effort, including downtown. The low-income communities of Southeast and Southwest Raleigh should not be expected to continue to house all of our low-income residents alone. Again,
Bob, you've exceeded your time. Thank you.
thank
Next, we have Barbara Smalley McMahon.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Barbara Smalley McMahon, 602 North Bloodworth Street. I'm also a member of the Wake Housing Justice Coalition and fully support Attorney Yolanda Taylor's letter written on behalf of the coalition, which was sent to the City Council on June 1. I want to underscore the 6th point in our letter. The city should use strategies that will mitigate the effects of gentrification and create and preserve affordable housing in downtown and throughout the city. As the city plans for affordable housing, it's important to know that many Black people who work in chain stores and fast food restaurants are only paid $7.25 more per hour than their enslaved ancestors were paid 400 years ago. In 2020, they struggled to live on incomes well below 30% of Raleigh's $92,700 per year AMI. One strategy we want the city to formally adopt to mitigate the effects of gentrification is a form-based code that's used as a planning tool to preserve the look and feel of a historic neighborhood with naturally occurring affordable housing. Maintaining Black and brown neighborhoods with food co-ops, back-to-school free backpacks, and celebrations of the culture passed down from ancestors lifts the sense of self-worth of those victimized by systemic racism. With every fresh vegetable grown, notebook given, native instrument played, dance celebrated, rap and poem recited, spirits are filled with an innate sense of self-worth and creativity as people made in the image of the Creator. Claiming our innate beauty and worth
Barbara,
as a human being is the strongest predictor that we'll grow up to use our gifts.
Thank you. Okay, next we have people who support, 5 people who signed up who support the bond referendum. I'll start with Cathy Thamesburg. And I just want to remind everybody that there's a 2-minute limit, and you can see that limit on the virtual podium. Thank you.
My name is Cathy Thamesburg. I live at 1908 Sierra Drive. I speak on behalf of Congregations for Social Justice, a 15-year-old multi-faith, multiracial organization that advocates on behalf of Wake County's most vulnerable residents, especially on affordable housing. We're part of the Wake County Housing Justice Coalition, and I speak to you tonight at a put your money where your mouth is moment. You've already heard from us about the bond because when we say we're committed to supporting our community's most vulnerable, we mean it. We're very pleased that you all voted in favor of an $80 million bond, but only if a significant portion targets those with incomes at or below 30% of AMI. Previous bonds have hardly touched this population. That means this time we have to work harder and be more just in how we use our bond funds. We can't just let developers build what they want. You can't just let the city staff do what they've always done. We love our nonprofit affordable housing developers, but they may have to work harder too. Building housing for our neighbors at this income level will mean that we can't develop as many units of housing. That's okay. We'd rather boast about how many people with the greatest need we house than a higher number of units built. And we'll be happy to suggest names for an accountability group to work with the city and developers to be certain that we're targeting 30% and below residents and to ensure that we don't gentrify neighborhoods in the process. Since the death of George Floyd, people in our community have been pleading for you to use your power to invest in communities that have been left behind by the way we've always done things. You can't disconnect the bond from this Black Lives Matter moment. Please, please make a public commitment to target a substantial portion of the bond funds for our neighbors most in need. We believe that leaving it flexible means you're okay with most of the investment going to those at much higher income levels. So you should know that leaving it flexible may force some passionate affordable housing advocates to oppose the bond. That is not where we want to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Bill Ahern.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Bill Ahern, and I'm President and CEO of Habitat for Humanity of Wake County. I was also a member of the 2020 Affordable Housing Bond Advisory Committee, and I'm here obviously to speak in favor of the proposed Affordable Housing Bond referendum. I'd like to commend you for initiating this effort, approving the recommendations of the Advisory Council, and keeping it moving in spite of the COVID-19 impacts on all of us. At Habitat Wake, we serve families that earn 25% to 80% of the area median income. We focus on home ownership to provide safe, stable housing and as an opportunity for families to build economic wealth. Our home buyers are essential members of the community who work in healthcare, childcare, retail, and social work. And we do not give away homes, but rather home buyers work alongside us to build their home and then purchase it at 100% of the fully appraised value at the time of closing. Our model empowers families to build a strong foundation for generations to follow. So you may wonder how families in a 25 to 30% AMI range can afford to purchase a home in Raleigh. Simply put, we set up multiple mortgages for the homeowner. The first mortgage is based on a monthly payment that is 30% of income to make it affordable, but it is the second mortgage that makes it a hand up and not a handout by making it a deferred mortgage with no monthly payment until it is fully payable at some point down the road when the home is sold. Using this methodology, we were able to partner with 55 families over this past year in helping them purchase a home that ranged in price from $142,000 to $250,000 with AMIs of 25 to 63%. And 12 of those were below 30% this past year. It's come to my attention, there's much discussion about focusing on households at 30% AMI and below. And on a surface, I support this, but I urge caution, and as sometimes these restrictive measures have unintended consequences. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Abby Cooper.
Abby had to drop off the call, Mayor.
Okay. Diane Bellamy.
Good evening to everyone. I am neither for or against this bond, and I am learning this evening, and I will have my mind set up at the end, I'm sure. I'd like to address several things. My most important one regarding the housing bond, if there is any monies that have been put aside to address COVID and its impact on renters in these the housing environment. One, simply because for several reasons. One, if they are renting and they only have a 1-year lease and they need to move, they move to another 1-year lease. And the COVID goes with them, or they move into it. I would like very much to have some money allocated to the containment of COVID by one, replacing the filters that are in these rental apartments and of developments, whether they're privately or publicly owned. I would like to see the spray disinfectant to the buildings as they had done in Korea and China to keep to minimize the COVID that's outside, and to remove the carpets that are perhaps in some of these apartments simply because the COVID is there. And if they had linoleum or some type of cleanable flooring, that can also eliminate or at least minimize COVID being in the house for most of the time. I'd like to also address the need for rental leases to have the option of 1, 3, or 5-year leases. This stabilizes a community. It gives a family the opportunity to save money for a down payment, and it also stabilizes the schools and children so that their education is not interrupted and they have to move and again have to deal with friendships.
Ma'am, your time is up. Thank you so much. And next we have Catherine Bellamy.
It's actually Catherine Bird.
Can you hear me?
Catherine? Yes.
Bird. I'm a resident of Raleigh. I had specified that I was speaking in support of the affordable housing bond referendum in that I do believe we should allocate these funds for improving access to housing. However, perhaps I should have chosen oppose. I do have serious concerns about the bond in its current form. It does not do enough to specifically commit a large portion of the funds towards those with the very lowest income. The resolution states that the bond is principally for the benefit of persons of low and moderate income. I'd like to see follow through on this commitment with clear designations of funds for those who earn 30% AMI or less. As you know, the Department of Housing and Urban Development describes 30% AMI as extremely low income, and yet with the minimum wage that we have, someone could be working 40 hours a week and be earning only 16% AMI. Let that sink in. In this community, you can work a full-time job and make approximately half of the extremely low income category. How are folks supposed to not just survive, but thrive and build generational wealth with numbers like that? It is critically important that we target these funds towards the people that need them most. Looking through survey results from the advisory committee report, 64% of respondents are homeowners. So it seems like the voices of the people in the most need were not well represented in this effort. Even so, 81% of those that did respond agreed that we need to focus on affordable housing options for low to moderate income renters. I would like to see that focus reflected clearly in the wording of the bond. With the COVID-19 crisis, the need for affordable rentals and immediate solutions is critical. The crisis is worsening and not going away anytime soon. The lower income workers who are deemed essential during this time, such as grocery store workers or food delivery people, deserve affordable and safe homes. People of color are disproportionately represented in the extremely low income population. As we strive as a country to correct institutional racism and systemic discrimination, access to affordable housing for all people must be among our top priorities. We need to break the cycle of homelessness and ensure that those most in need benefit most from these funds. We can look to Durham's bond as an example of transparency in spending and clear commitments to those in the most dire need. I'm in support of the statement of Attorney Yolanda Taylor and the Wake County Housing Justice Coalition. We need the actions of the city government to match the words that they have proclaimed in support of communities of color and in support of low-income residents. Black Lives Matter.
Your time is up. Thank you so much. Okay, that's everybody who had signed up to speak. I'm going to close the public hearing. Oh, City Attorney?
Yeah, one thing, Mayor, make sure that you note that council has received and reviewed the written comments that were submitted.
Yes, I was getting there. Thank you. All right, I'm going to close the public hearing. Before we take any action, I do want to note that there were a number of emails and comments sent to us. The clerk has shared. I hope you have seen them, reviewed them. And now I'm going to ask if there are any questions for Mr. Jarvis before we continue. Councilor Branch?
Just one question for action item number 3 for next steps. Where are we as far as the timeline of receiving some information back? He's still there.
Larry?
It'll be our intent to have that information for you after you come back from your break.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I'm going to make the following motion. I move to adopt the bond order and the resolution calling the bond referendum set out in the agenda item. So moved. Do I have a second?
Question. Comment.
Hold on 1 second, please. Councilor Stewart, you have seconded that motion. Councilor Cox?
Yes, I mean, I want to make a statement that, I definitely support an affordable housing bond and particularly the $80 million. But I hear the comments of people that we have not really specified how we're going to spend this money. The way it stands right now, it's a blank check. And we really should be spending it on people who are earning less than 30% AMI. And for that reason, I'm afraid I cannot support this bond as it is today. We are a council, and when this council came into power, it prided itself on acting quickly and decisively. And we have not acted quickly and decisively in setting policy regarding how this money is going to be spent. And I regret that we're at this point in time, and that we don't have that policy. So I'm not going to vote in favor at this point.
That's fine. Councillor Melton?
Yeah, I have, I guess, a question or point of clarification. What we're engaging in this moment is continuing the process to move the bond forward in the fall. Is that correct?
Yes, we have a deadline, and we have to do this now to get that on the bond, to get the bond on the ballot in November.
But we still have, sorry, go ahead.
What will happen after is, like we have done with every other bond in the 10 years I was on the council, you take these steps and then you formulate the policy around it. And then, like, a housing bond is different than a parks bond. When you do a parks bond, you say, these are the parks that are going to be built. With a housing bond, we have buckets of money. We don't have specific projects yet that will be built. So the buckets kind of define where we will spend that money. And then, as Mr. Jarvis said, he'll be coming back to us in a month with a full report on next steps.
Okay. So again, I just want to say that I want to keep this process moving forward. I look forward to receiving the information from staff regarding specific policy options for achieving greater 30% AMI income targeting housing. I am in favor of that, but I want to keep this process moving, and I'm going to vote in favor. So thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, clerk, motion was by myself, then Councillor Stewart second. Passes 6-1 with Councillor Cox opposed. Next, we have the extension of bond orders for the 2013 Transportation and 2014 Parks referendum.
Mayor, if I could, just very quickly, this is an extension item associated with the ability for the city to issue debt for an additional 3-year period from the 2013 and 2014 transportation and parks bonds from previous years. It doesn't have any impact on the projects themselves, and is pretty much a technical item to just give us more time on how we issue the debt and manage our cash flow. So we don't have a presentation on this particular item. Staff is available to answer any additional detailed questions. But with that, you may just wish to see, I don't believe anyone's here to speak, but if we have questions, we'll respond.
Okay. I am going to open the hearing. I'll say that nobody has signed up to speak on this. As of meeting time, there were no written comments we received. I just want to clarify this with the clerk. No written comments. You're on mute.
That is correct. We did not receive any written comments.
Okay. With that, I will close the public hearing. Do we have any questions related to this? Councillor Cox?
So just to be clear, Mr. Manager, when you say it has no impact on the projects, that also includes the timeline of the projects. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's a project timeline that is out there now for each of the various transportation and park projects, and they remain the same as stated today.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion to move to adopt the 2 extension orders as set out in the agenda item.
Second.
Councilor Branch has seconded that. All in favor? Opposed? Clerk, that was unanimous. Next, we have the Stormwater Management Enterprise Rate Adjustment.
Mayor, again, thank you. This is an item in follow-up to your budget process to consider an amendment to your stormwater fee of 50 cents per month. And what I would suggest is Wayne Miles is here from Engineering Services Stormwater Management to just give you a few quick reminder comments, particularly for those who might be watching the meeting at home. and then we'd be happy to answer any questions. So with that, I'll ask Wayne Miles to make a few comments.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Mayor, members of the City Council, thank you for the opportunity to come before you today. As you recall, based on input we received from you at the June 8th public hearing, staff has prepared a budget amendment based on an increase of the monthly stormwater fee of 50 cents per single-family equivalent unit. Should that go into effect as proposed on September 1st, that would generate about $1.7 million for fiscal year 21, and staff would propose that that entire increase go toward capital improvements projects aimed at neighborhood flooding, road flooding, and home flooding problems. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any other questions that the council may have.
Any questions of staff? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. No one has signed up to speak. I'm going to open the hearing and close the hearing. Do I have a motion to approve? Councilor Branch?
I move for approval of the rate increase.
Second. Councilor Stewart? All in favor? Opposed? Okay, thank you. Next, we have CP 818 Rogers Farm.
Good evening. This is a request to amend the comprehensive plan. It's a three-part request. It would modify the future land use map, the street plan, and the grade separations map. It's citizen initiated. And on the next slide, I can show you. So this is in the area of North Rogers Lane and New Bern Avenue, east of downtown. The area involved largely includes the existing plan development zoning that's in place, that's been also requested by the same applicant to be rezoned. We'll see that request later and separately from this request tonight. So you can see we're largely on the north side of New Bern Avenue, south of Raleigh Beach Road. On the next slide, you can see the future land use map requests that they're making. So this area is all designated right now as moderate density residential on the future land use map. And the recommendation from Planning Commission that the applicant also supports is to change this area to a combination of community mixed use and office and residential mixed use. Initially, the applicant had requested entirely community mixed use, but in conversation with the Planning Commission, revised their request. And that request as revised not only has the endorsement of the Planning Commission, but is consistent with relevant comprehensive plan policies, which you could see on the next slide. Keep going, please. So a number of consistent policies here. And then on the next slide, I believe there are just a couple of inconsistent policies, but the overwhelming number of policies are consistent. The second part of the request, next slide, is to revise the street plan in the comprehensive plan. So the current plan designation calls for an extension of South Hall Road south to from Raleigh Beach Road to New Bern Avenue, and also the realignment of North Rogers Lane to intersect with that new extension. So you can see that it's shown in a light blue and aqua color, that South Hall Road extension, and in purple, teeing into that, the realignment of North Rogers Lane. What the applicant is proposing instead is to change the street type designation to a narrower street section, so not as many lanes, to maintain the current alignment of North Rogers Lane. And so the South Hall, instead of extending south to New Bern Avenue, would continue as North Rogers rather than being realigned, and there'd be a bend on the east side of North Rogers that connect Rogers Lane to New Bern Avenue. This request on the next slide you can see is also consistent with the comprehensive plan. The majority of the policies are consistent, although there are a couple that are inconsistent listed on the next slide. And then the final part of the request is to remove, and you can see a map on the next slide, is to remove a planned grade separation and interchange on what would be New Bern Avenue and what would have been the extension of South Hall Road. Those plans were adopted before the completion of Interstate 87. And so with the street plan request that the applicant is making and the change in our larger infrastructure plan for transportation in this area, they're asking to remove this planned interchange from the comprehensive plan. So those are the three pieces of the request. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I know that the representative of the applicant, Worth Mills, is also available.
Okay. Councillor Cox.
Yes, the Planning Commission had a split vote. There were a couple people that I guess voted against this, and I was wondering what the objections were.
A lot of the Planning Commission's discussion was centered around some residential development on the north to northeast part of this request and concern about how the street plan and the future land use map designations would respond or combine or be compatible with that. And so the I would just say those were the concerns, right? How new development would relate to existing residential development that's nearby.
Have any of those concerns been addressed?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question.
Have any of those concerns been addressed since the Planning Commission decision?
Well, I think the change in the future land use map designation to reduce the area of community mixed use down to a smaller area and include office residential mixed use as a transition in terms of future land use would be one way that the request has changed. And then the other piece is around street connectivity. And this request doesn't really have a good way to address the street connectivity questions about how new streets would connect to existing streets in the existing residential development.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, no one has signed up to speak on this matter. So I'm going to open the public hearing and close the hearing. Would anyone like to make a motion? Councillor Cox?
I would like to make a motion to approve, but I don't see any specific language in the docs.
This one, you would just make a motion to approve it in accordance with the recommended action.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve in accordance with the recommended action.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Branch. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Clerk, that passes unanimously. Thank you. The next item we have is text change 1619 accessory dwelling development options.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Mark Holland, Planning and Development. This is the text change for accessory dwelling units is TC 16-19. This text change would remove the requirement in the UDO for the accessory dwelling unit overlay district and would create a new section to allow the construction of an attached or detached accessory dwelling unit on the same lot as a principal residential building as a by right development option. purpose and need of this is to diversify and expand our housing options. It would remove the overlay district and allow the ADUs by right. It would require no additional zoning or zoning changes, and it would allow individual property owners to decide if an ADU is appropriate for their property. New regulations would be established. These would include an allowable increases to the allowable floor area, the number of permitted ADUs on a single lot, the occupancy of that ADU, access, transfer of property, and the prohibition of use as overnight lodging or a live-work unit. It would also have to meet the requirements of Article 6.7 for accessory structures and use. We would also include a definition for ADUs. In short, this would be a self-contained dwelling unit that will be located on the same lot as a principal dwelling, but be used independent of and subordinate to the principal dwelling. A list of what is typically found in an ADU will be included in the definition. It would state that it could also be located above a garage, and that the ADU may be detached, attached, or internal to the principal dwelling. Staff is available for any questions.
Okay, do we have any questions of staff? Okay, no one has signed up to speak for this hearing, so I'm going to open the hearing and close it.
Mayor Baldwin?
Yes.
You have received a number of letters in support of this text change, and they've been forwarded to you over the last couple of days, but there's been a number of letters of support.
Okay. Everybody good? Okay. Thank you, clerk. Right. Do we have a motion? Councillor Stewart?
Before a motion, there are a couple changes I'd like to suggest at the table. If folks will look at the ordinance, there was the edit that was made just for clarification's sake under section 2.6.3D1. So that now says and meet both of the following, both A and B. So that has already been taken care of. In addition, I'd like to recommend that we strike number 3, which is about occupying, that the unit should be occupied by no more than 2 adults plus minors. Striking number 6 about overnight lodging, and striking number 7 about live-work unit. Number 3 is really hard to enforce. Number 6, we actually have been dealing with short-term rentals in other places, and so I think it would be better to keep it out of this specific code. And then same with number 7. In addition, there's been a request for one additional change in the chart, which is for increasing the max living area for lot size. I'm gonna have to zoom in here. Lot sizes 40,000 square feet or over, so that's about an acre, to 1,000 square feet. Right now, it tops out at 800 if you're at 20 to 40,000 square feet, or if you're over 40,000 square feet. So we're gonna change, or recommending we change just that one box from 800 to 1,000 square feet. I'm happy to answer any questions before we move forward, but that would be my recommended changes before we adopt this ordinance.
Councillor Melton, and then Councillor Branch.
Yes, I support all of those changes. There's another part in here that I wanted to discuss under D1B. It says shall not be affixed to or constructed on a permanent foundation and not be a manufactured home or movable structure. I know in the afternoon session we were going to have a greater discussion on manufactured homes. For purposes of this text change, I'm wondering if we should just remove the two words manufactured home from that section and just say that the ADU must be on a permanent foundation and not a movable structure.
I think we're okay leaving it in for now, but I would look to our city attorney.
And is Ken Bowers available? And the reasons and other definitions, I think that make it clear that under the current UDO, they're not allowed in these districts. And is Ken there, Mark? You mute.
The podium is muted.
Hi, Ken Bowers, Planning and Development. So there is a provision in the text change that relates to manufactured dwellings or trailers, and there's also a provision in the use standards of the code. A manufactured home is defined in Chapter 12 of the code as essentially any structure that's built off-site and on a chassis and delivered to delivered either in one part or in multiple pieces and put on a foundation or kept mobile on site. That would probably be a broad enough definition to sweep up any type of off-site manufactured structure, whether it was a tiny house or a mobile home or a travel trailer, for example. And those uses are not permitted in any district in the city except for manufactured housing and in a planned development if so specified in the master plan. So regardless of whether that provision is altered in this text change, it probably wouldn't be permitted without looking deeper at the UDO. However, that deeper look, I think, requires us to look at how we regulate manufactured housing more broadly. And so it probably is a topic that staff needs a little more time to research. We understand the intent is to allow some innovative housing manufacturing techniques to be available for ADUs, maybe even in some cases for primary dwellings. But we feel like some more research and work would be needed to have a recommendation about how to address that.
But does leaving it in here hinder? Are we going to have to go back and change this later if it comes up in the discussion, the greater discussion?
Yes, so you would have to potentially change this section of the code and other sections of the code. And I guess the question is, do you want to change this section of the code now, or do you want to leave it for this larger change if that becomes something that we wish to do? And I don't think it makes a huge amount of difference either way, because the manufactured home is probably already prohibited, but it's probably easier to not change it now and to look at it comprehensively.
Okay, so then
go ahead. I was going to say, I would just add, if they are not yet allowed, maybe that people would want to know that it wouldn't be misleading. They would be on notice of it and wouldn't have to find that out after they got there to get a permit until we can change it. That's another point.
Got it. Then I am totally fine with the changes that Council Member Stewart has suggested. I support all of those changes. Specifically, the overnight lodging issue, I think it's appropriate to address that issue in our short-term rental ordinance that's coming through the pipeline, and to leave this ordinance strictly related to accessory dwelling units. So I support all of the changes Councilmember Stewart has brought forward.
Councillor Cox?
Yeah, I want to say that I thought that the proposal that was coming forward to us is actually pretty good. I do not support Councilor Stewart's recommendation to allow these units to become short-term rentals. This really doesn't address our housing shortage, and really will end up relegating a large number of these units to Airbnb-type vacation rentals. I just don't think that's the proper intent. And so therefore, I would have supported the original proposal coming from the Planning Commission, but I think it's regrettable that really what Ms. Stewart wants to do is to introduce commercial into our residential areas, and really it negates the ability of us to be able to create affordable housing. So I'll vote no.
Councillor Melton and then Councillor Branch.
Yeah, I just want to say again that how we regulate short-term rentals is an entirely separate issue. There's an entirely separate text change that's working its way through Planning Commission that could address this issue. I don't think it needs to be included in the accessory dwelling unit text change. If we're going to talk about short-term rentals, it's an entirely different discussion. I would also remind everyone that there are folks whose livelihoods are dependent upon those issues at times. I think that is an argument and a fight for another day. Today, we were talking about accessory dwelling units, and I think how any short-term rental is regulated, a whole house, an accessory dwelling unit, a bedroom, is a separate issue that will be addressed in a separate text change, and it should not be in this ordinance.
Councilor Branch?
So just for my own clarity, Madam Attorney may be able to help me. If we do not remove item 7, which says it shall not be used as a live work unit, any existing ADUs that are someone uses for their business or whatever, they would be a violation of the code, correct?
A live work unit is a separate use, and Ken can chime in, that requires a special use permit. So anyone with an ADU who would want to utilize the live work option, if this is taken out, would still have to go to the Board of Adjustment and ask for a special use permit. So that's an additional protection where neighbors would get notice and there's a hearing. Ken, did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay, so that means they would still have to get permission. So, okay, you answered my question. I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, we have a motion. Well, no, we don't have a motion yet. Councilor Stewart, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated July 7th, 2020, contained in the agenda materials, along with the changes we just discussed. So striking number 3, number 6, number 7, and increasing the max living area for over 40,000 square feet to 1,000 square feet. And to approve the zoning text amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action.
Councilor Melton, is that a second? Okay. Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hey, clerk, that was 6-1 in favor with Councilor Cox opposed. I have one thing I wanted to add to that, just a question for either Ken or Mark. You know, we've spent feels like many years now, trying to move forward on ADUs. We received a memo right before the meeting tonight about what other communities are doing to actually encourage the construction of accessory dwelling units. I know we haven't had that discussion, but some communities are waiving fees. Others are allowing pre-made designs so people can kind of pick and choose and they don't have to spend, say, as much money. They can save money. Other communities such as Durham actually has a plan for ADUs in communities that tend to be more low income as a way to help build wealth. Can we ask staff to look at some of the things that we might do to actually encourage the construction of ADUs? Like, this is a great first step, but when you look at what cities like Portland have done in LA and whatnot, before they actually got the construction done, they had to take steps to encourage it. So, Ken, do you think that's something y'all can take a look at for us?
Yes, we can do that research and report back to you probably early this fall.
Okay, thank you. Well, it took us a few years to get this done, so I think a few more months will be good. Thank you. Okay. Anything else on that topic? Councilor Stewart?
I just want to say how excited I am that we now are going to allow ADUs by right. And thank you, Mayor, for bringing up the question about how do we now incentivize their use to make sure that we are providing them for housing. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, next we have Text change 1719, design alternates.
Again, Mark Holland, Planning and Development. TC 17-19 is for design alternates. This text change would replace the option for a design adjustment from the provisions of the UDO, Articles 8.4 and 8.5. It would create more objectively applied criteria at the staff level and provide a path to a quasi-judicial hearing for requests that cannot be approved administratively. In addition, this text change reorganizes Article 8.4 and 8.5 into new articles 8.4 and 8.5 for new and existing streets and street cross sections to improve readability and remove some of the duplication of the regulations. The major modifications that we look for with this text change would be the process would be retitled to design alternate. The current process is titled design adjustment. The quasi-judicial public hearing will occur at the Planning Commission. Currently, that is tasked with by the to the Board of Adjustment, and the language for streetscape plans would be enhanced. Section 836 would remove the findings and relocate them to the Section 10-18. Section 841, which describes the regulations for construction and acceptance of streets, and would identify these standards and would require within the downtown area. It would identify an option for payment in lieu of installation, and it would provide an allowance for the public access easement for sidewalks on private property. Section Section 841 would establish location priority for street trees on streets that are controlled by the state or by the city, and street trees placed on private property. This section would expand upon the submittal requirements for streetscape plans. It would Section 851 would give design alternate review of street cross sections to the Planning Commission. Section 854 would establish a 1-foot width increase for a 2-lane divided avenue. Section 858 would give a dimensional allowance to the streetscape for approved stormwater improvements. Section 10.1.2 would give specific approval authority to design adjustments to the Planning Commission. Section 10.2.18 would restate the specific approval authority for design alternates, regarding the UDO design alternates to standards within the Raleigh Street Design Manual, and it would identify the application requirements and would again identify the Planning Commission action. Section 10.2.18 would identify the findings for approval. It would identify the findings for approval by the Planning Commission of a design alternate from the Articles 832, 834, 835, and for 8.4 and 8.5, or from the Raleigh Street Design Manual. With this change, there was also a modification made to what is known as the Christmas plan. This is the updated map, and this was provided in your attachments of the revised, modernized, if you will, area, which is would be what was formerly known as the Christmas plan. With this text amendment, there is also language that was added, and this happened after the initial presentation of this item, that these design alternates could also be heard by the design committee or appearance commission rather. And that was something that was placed in this ordinance by the city attorney's office. So I would ask them if they have any additional information on that they could elaborate on it. But the appearance commission is also given as an alternative body to hear these quasi-judicial requests. And with that, I would be ready for any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions of Mark? City Attorney?
I did want to, and Ken's available too, at the end, Mark made it clear, the way that this is written, if you remember, the Appearance Commission came before you a while back and was actually, because of some changes,
yes,
wanted some more work to do. The Planning Commission is very busy. The way that the ordinance is written, proposed, is to give council the authority to designate either the Planning Commission or the Appearance Commission to hear these particular cases. So we would actually ask that you sort of pick one tonight, and I'll let Ken comment on, his recommendation on that. But the reason that it was written that way is because either one of those boards may be more appropriately suited at any particular time to do these cases. This is almost the last, but not the total last one, where we have changed these, put in these objective standards, which has significantly reduced the burden on the Board of Adjustment, and we expect this to go further in that direction.
Right. Ken?
Just to add a little bit to that, the code currently, this is sort of phase 2 of a 3-phase process of amending the process for things that are known as design adjustments and administrative alternates. The administrative alternates are currently heard by the Planning Commission. I mean, not the Planning Commission, the Appearance Commission, but not in a quasi-judicial setting. They will be after a future text change. These items, there was some discussion as to whether they should go to the Planning Commission or we should consolidate all of them with the Appearance Commission. The arguments in favor of the Appearance Commission right now are both the membership of the body is well equipped to review the nature of the requests. Their agenda tends to be less full than the Planning Commission, as I believe you experienced with the request for 4 or 5 time extensions today. The Planning Commission has a heavy workload already, and adding hearings to their workload will only increase that. So there's more capacity at the Appearance Commission to conduct these types of hearings. So based on all of that, it seems like the best option in front of us right now is to move the review and approval of these to the Appearance Commission.
Hey. No one has signed up to speak on this issue. Do we have any questions of staff? Councillor Cox.
Does this really reduce our caseload, or are we just shifting them around from the Board of Adjustment to the Planning Commission and the Appearance Commission?
It's reducing the load. Here's before, all of the cases were subjective going to staff, which is the thing that we needed to change. Right now, with these changes, a majority of the changes, most of the changes can go to the staff for an objective determination. So they don't have to go for a hearing before a quasi-judicial board at all. And so the staff has done months, probably over a year now of work trying to figure out the most reasonable exceptions that shouldn't require a hearing. So that's why the hearings are being decreased, is because a lot of the cases are never going to hearing. So this is something also that could potentially go to the Board of Adjustment, but I think staff thought that the subject matter was better suited for these other boards. So it's still a pretty significant case drop for any of the boards.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I am going to open the hearing and I am going to close the hearing. Based on the recommendation we just heard from Ken, do we have a motion? Anyone would like to make a motion? Okay, Councilor Melton, I was just getting ready to do it. Go on.
No one else was jumping up, so I'll do it. I said I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated July 7th, 2020, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning text amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action.
May he declare that that would go to the Appearance Commission.
So moved.
I'll second your motion then. How's that? Okay, clerk, you got the addition of the Appearance Commission. That's where this will go. Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Clerk passes unanimously. All right, the next item, parking requirements, TC 1A20.
Okay, TC 1A-20 is a text amendment to the parking requirements. This, along with the next one, these are pretty brief. The proposed changes would eliminate all minimum parking requirements within the DX, downtown mixed-use zoning district. It would eliminate the minimum residential parking requirements within the TOD district and would reduce the minimum parking requirements for multi-unit living citywide. The current non-residential requirement for parking is 1 space per 500 square feet. No spaces would be required for the first 10,000 square feet. The current residential requirement is 1 space per dwelling unit with no spaces required for the first 16 units. The proposed changes would eliminate the minimum required parking in the downtown mixed-use district. In the TOD, the current non-residential requirement is 1 space per 500 square feet with no spaces required for the first 10,000 square feet of mixed-use building that meets the transparency and ground floor height requirements. The current residential requirement is 1 space per dwelling unit with no spaces required for the first 16 units. The proposed changes would eliminate minimum residential parking requirements within the TOD. To give you a chart here of what the multifamily parking requirements are, what the current standard is versus what is proposed, you can see from this chart that there's a reduction, significant reduction. We're decreasing it by 1 full space or a partial space, since for 0 to 1 bedrooms, it's 1 parking space plus 1 space for every 10 units, and to be designated as visitors parking. The current standard would be 1 space, a flat requirement of 1 space per unit. You would have that same standard for a 2-bedroom. It would be 2 spaces per bedroom, 1 space per bedroom, and plus the 1 space per 10 units for visitor parking. That for a 2-bedroom, it would now be 1.5. For a 3-bedroom, it would be 2 spaces per unit. 4-bedroom, 2.5, and 5 or more would be 3 spaces per unit. Staff is available for any questions.
Okay, do we have any questions? Councilor Branch.
Yeah, obviously you can't make half a parking space. So those numbers are basically for the allocation for multi-unit development when they're calculating how many spaces are required, correct? Where you have 1.5 and 2.5?
Yes, that would be counted towards the total number of spaces required. So you may end up with a fraction there, but since you can't create half a parking space, it would be my assumption that it would go round off to the higher number.
Okay.
Any other questions? Hey, nobody has signed up to speak on this matter, so I'm going to open up the public hearing and I'm going to close it. Would anyone like to make a motion on this? Councilor Branch?
I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated July 7th, 2020, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning text amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda items under recommended action.
Councilor Stewart seconds that. Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Okay. Motion passes unanimously, Clerk. And next we have text change TC 19B, building height and cottage courts.
Okay, this is the last text change for the evening. TC 1B-20 is the text change for the building height and cottage courts. The proposed text change would allow cottage courts as a by right building type use in the R2 and R4 zoning districts with a 50% density bonus. It would increase the maximum number of dwelling units in a cottage court from 15, the current 15, to the proposed 30. It would eliminate maximum sidewall height for dwelling units, and it would modify the language to improve clarity of the regulations. This text change would also allow an increase in feet for 4- and 5-story buildings. The current standard in feet is 62 feet for a 4-story building. That would be increased to 68 feet. And for a 5-story building, the current standard is 75, and that would be increased to 80 feet. Staff is available for any questions.
Councilor Stewart?
Bear with me. I have a somewhat technical question that was brought up to me by a constituent. Section 4 on the cottage court piece, measuring the area by net site area as opposed to measuring it by gross site area, which I understand is how we do for our residential developments. Just wondering if staff has thoughts on if that is a inconsistency we need to change, or if there was a reason for going with net instead of gross in this case.
I believe net is how it's currently stated within the ordinance. The gross site would also include the areas that have the amenities and any sort of parking that they may have. It would include the cottage, the courtyard. So the net, I'm assuming the net would be part of what is where the actual residential development will occur. So it would be not include that courtyard area or any other areas that they have for amenities.
So it sounds like it's intentional and needs to be there.
Yes.
Great. That's what I need to know. Thank you so much. Mayor, that's it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. We have nobody signed up to speak on these issues, so I'm going to open the hearing and I'm going to close the hearing. I'm going to ask for a motion. Thank you, Councilor Stewart.
I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated July 7th, 2020, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning text amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action.
Do we have a second? Councilor Cox, was that a second?
No, it was to make a comment.
Okay, Councilor Melton is the second. Okay, so we have a motion by Councilor Stewart, a second by Councilor Melton. Councilor Cox, you have a comment.
Yes. In general, I favor this text change. However, I oppose it and will vote against it because of the scale of what's being proposed. I think going from 15 to 30 units for cottage courts is just too large. I think going to the taller buildings in particular, smaller buildings I think are more affordable to build. I think smaller buildings are more energy efficient. They generate less pollution. They offer better compatibility with surrounding neighborhoods, and they offer less visual pollution. There's nothing to be gained by going to a taller building. It's just a taller building. There's no increase in density with a taller building. So for those reasons, I'm going to vote against this proposed text change.
Okay. Well, we are going to take our last vote of the evening. All in favor, please raise your hands. Opposed? Clerk, that is a 6-1 vote with Councillor Cox in opposition. So I just wanted to, first off, thank you staff for all your work here tonight. Want to just mention a couple of things. Today, we sent letters to the Governor, the General Assembly, and the Chief Justice asking for more transparency and oversight related to our Police Advisory Board. We approved an $80 million housing affordability bond, which will be on the ballot in November. And we will receive an update on the 30% AMI when we return from our break. That will be our August 17th or September 1st meeting, or first meeting in September, rather. We approved ADUs by right throughout the city. We reduced parking requirements and will now allow cottage courts in R2 and R4 districts, in essence, throughout the city. Some of these issues have been with the council for many years. So I want to commend all of you for your work today. I want to commend the staff's efforts. I don't see the staff because the virtual podium is turned off, but they're probably all cheering that we're going on a break, because this will allow them to kind of catch up with the other text changes and other things that we initiated before COVID. So I just want to thank everybody. Be safe, wear your mask, and stay healthy. We do have a meeting, a special meeting that I have called on the 14th. Please do your homework in looking at the applications that have come in. Tell you, I looked at them tonight. Another good group of people. This is going to be a really hard decision. So do your homework, really give it some thought, and we'll be balloting this weekend. Remember, 10, noon, and 2 are the deadlines on Saturday to get our ballots in. And we will be watching a virtual forum at 3 o'clock on Sunday. So thank you, everyone. And we will see you again next Tuesday, and then we'll all have a break from each other. Don't look so happy. Okay, thank you. Good night, everyone.